GamePlan.com, where football makes sense. I'm Emory Hunt, the czar of the playbook. Bring you our 2013 college football preview show. And today we're going to break down the Big Ten Conference. We're going to look at this conference top to bottom. But first, let's start on the recruiting trail to see how well these teams recruited this past offseason.
You could make a case that Ohio State not only had the best recruiting class in the Big Ten, but in the entire country. When you look at some of the talent they bring in, a lot of guys will see time early as a freshman. You look at the defensive signees, guys like Billy Price, Trey Johnson. They went heavy on the linebacker and defensive lineman, but the one guy I want you to keep an eye on is Joey Bosa, 6'5", 270-pound defensive end. Here's a guy that can play outside in the 7 technique or play the 5. He has the strength at the point of attack and should do a great job as a freshman getting on the football field. Wisconsin signs JUCO transfer Tanner McAvoy, 6'6", 215 pounds, a guy that was an original signee of the South Carolina Gamecocks, left that program, went to JUCO, put up some amazing numbers, and is in the running for the starting job for Wisconsin this season. Continuing with the tradition of adding speed and explosiveness coming out of the backfield, Terrell Newby fits that to the T, 5'10", 180 pounds, definitely has the speed to take it the distance. The Michigan Wolverines were able to land one of the top running back prospects in the country in Derek Green, 6 feet, 222 pounds, a guy that probably will start for the Wolverines as a true freshman, and that says a lot about the kid's talent. Michigan State signed 3 running backs this offseason, but the one that stood out to me as the better one, in my opinion, is Delton Williams, 6'2", 205. Could play a litany of positions for the Spartans, but you see right here what he brings to the table as a runner. His broken field running skills are uncanny, has speed, he has the elusiveness, and also can catch the football out of the backfield. Northwestern wanted to bolster the interior of the offensive line, so they signed Brad North. Played left tackle in high school, but this is a guy that will kick down inside, and he'll definitely be a good one throughout the course of his career for the Wildcats. Quarterback Danny Etling is another player that could start as a true freshman in the Big Ten. He's already on campus at Purdue, participated in the spring, and was doing a fine job and came out of the spring having the inside track for the starting job. The Illinois Fighting Illini signed a JUCO tackle, Dallas Hinkhouse, 6'5", 275 pounds. Shows the athleticism to play the left side as he did at the JUCO level. Will move over to the right tackle at Illinois and could see time very early. The Indiana Hoosiers got better in the secondary with Antonio Allen, a safety. This is a guy that hits like a freight train and could see time in nickel and dime packages for that Hoosiers defense. The Penn State Nittany Lions made a big splash in the recruiting game, signing Christian Hackenberg, 6'3", 215 pounds, a kid that has a rocket arm and is one of the top quarterback prospects in the country. Another player that could also find his way starting as a true freshman. Minnesota linebacker Damian Wilson, a JUCO transfer, 6'2", 255. They want to upgrade the athleticism and the depth at that linebacker position, and he could start right away in the middle. The Iowa Hawkeyes wanted to add speed and explosiveness out on the flanks, which is why JUCO transfer Damon Powell was a huge signing for these guys and could see time very early, may even start as well as a JUCO transfer. The Ohio State Buckeyes have the best group of quarterbacks in the conference. You look at Braxton Miller, who's going to be a front runner for the Heisman Trophy, but they also have a very good backup in Kenny Guyton that's capable of winning some games and could start on many other Big Ten teams in the conference. It seems like the Wisconsin Badgers always have a stable of backs at their disposal, and when you look at James White and Melvin Gordon, they have a phenomenal 1-2 punch in the backfield. I think the Indiana Hoosiers have a dangerous core of receivers. You look at Shane Wynn, Cody Latimer, Kofi Hughes, even tight end Ted Boser are guys that can definitely get it done. It's the reason why they have hope this season to get back to a bowl game. You can also make a legitimate case for the Nebraska Cornhuskers having the best offensive line in the conference, but I have to give the nod to the Ohio State Buckeyes. 4 out of 5 starters return, led by 2 all-conference performers up front in left guard Andrew Norwell and left tackle Jack Muhort. I think the Northwestern Wildcats have a very good defensive front. They're athletic and they're stout versus the run. You look at Tyler Scott leading the way with 9 sacks last season, 3.5 TFLs, and also finished with 42 tackles. The Michigan State Spartans boast an impressive group of linebackers led by Max Bullough, who's a 2-time All-Big Ten performer, and Denikos Allen is a player that's always around the football, and Tywan Jones is a junior who's just as active and is always making plays in the backfield. And I also believe the Spartans have the best secondary in the conference. They're a deep group led by cornerback Darquez Dennard, who's an NFL prospect. And keep an eye on safety Isaiah Lewis, a strong safety, 5'10", 200 pounds, a guy that was second on the team in tackles with 80. The Northwestern Wildcats are solid in every facet of special teams. The return game with Venrick Mark, who brought back 2 punts for touchdowns, and the kicking game with Jeff Buxton, a guy that only missed 1 field goal last year, and that was from 50, but he was 6 for 6 from 40 to 49 yards. The offensive MVP, in my opinion, will be Devin Gardner out of Michigan, a guy that's going to be able to bring the passing element to the offense for the Wolverines. He's going to expand what they do offensively. They were already a dangerous team last year. This is a guy that could make the difference and help them get to where they want to be at the end of the season. The defensive MVP, Ryan Shazier out of Ohio State, a guy that's always around the football, whether it be making plays in the backfield, putting pressure on the quarterback, or even dropping back in coverage and making plays on the ball. Big Ten Rookie of the Year will be Danny Etling, the quarterback of Purdue. Here's a guy that could start as a true freshman. If he does, I think he has a great chance to get them to a bowl game. I do believe Purdue will be vastly improved this season. The best pro prospect is Taylor Lewin, a guy that could have came out last season and been a top 15 pick. This year, he may even be a top 5 pick. He's that talented, one of the best tackle prospects in the country. I believe the Indiana Hoosiers have the toughest schedule in the Big Ten. You look at the first couple of games, you can't look past Navy or Missouri. Both teams are very tough. Penn State is a solid bunch, but when you look at the road games that they have to play in the Big Ten, they have to travel to Michigan State, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Ohio State. If they're going to get to a bowl game, they're going to have to knock off at least 1 or 2 of these teams on the road. Let's start off in the leaders division with the Illinois Fighting Illini, and the reason for optimism, they can run the football. They have Donovan Young and Josh Ferguson, and both guys are very talented. And while he had a down year, quarterback Nathan Schillhouse is a very talented player that's 100% healthy going into the season. The linebacking core is also very good with sensational sophomore Mason Monheim, who led the team in tackles with 86, and weak side linebacker Jonathan Brown. But the cause for concern, once again, they're learning a new offense, and that's going to be a transition. Plus, the defense was decimated by graduation, in particular the secondary and the defensive line. The hope is that the defense can get back to what they were in 2011 with a host of young guys at their disposal, but right now I see them finishing last in the leaders division. Next up, we have the Indiana Hoosiers, and the reason for optimism, offensively, they look ready to take the next step, and getting quarterback Trey Robertson back should allow them to maintain the 30-point per game output. And I love the receiving core with Wynn, Latimer, Hughes, Bolser. Those guys are very talented. They have a veteran offensive line and a solid stable of backs led by Stephen Houston. Now, the cause for concern is the entire defense. Will they be able to stop teams this season? 5 yards a carry given up last year, as well as 35 points a game. The hope is that the sophomores that struggled last year that are now juniors take a huge leap and get better. Now, the schedule, while tough, it is favorable with only 4 road games, but the problem is the road games are at Wisconsin, Ohio State, Michigan State, as well as Michigan. If they're going to make any leeway in the Big Ten, they're going to have to pull off an upset on the road in order to get to 6 victories. Moving on to the Penn State Nittany Lions, and the reason for optimism is the fact that despite some of the losses that they had on both sides of the ball, there's still a very solid squad. Defensive end Deion Barnes should put together a monster campaign, and that'll just continue to help out a very talented back 7. Keep an eye on linebacker Mike Hall is a breakout candidate in my opinion, and offensively the veteran offensive line and talented options in the backfield and on the flanks should give the offense life. Now, the cause for concern, depth is and will be a big concern for the Nittany Lions until they get off suspension. They can't afford any injuries, and there's a question mark at the quarterback position, not due to a lack of talent, because I think both guys are very talented and capable of leading this football team, but they have to settle on a guy, and the battle is between Under Armour All-American Christian Hackenberg and JUCO sophomore transfer Tyler Ferguson. So if they can settle on a guy, they'll be a lot better than they were last year, but again, depth is a real concern here for the Nittany Lions. One of my surprise teams in the Big Ten this year will be the Purdue Boilermakers. I'm a big fan of new head coach Darrell Hazel, and there's some pieces available here for him to be successful in year 1. He's going to bring a more pro-style rushing attack, and that'll be key because of the talent they have in the backfield led by running back Akeem Hunt. The defensive line, despite losing Kawan Short, is loaded with talent with guys in Bruce Gasson and Ryan Russell. The secondary will also excel with cornerback Ricardo Allen and safety Landon Fletcher. So those guys can really play some football back there. Now, the cause for concern, they're going to have to find a quarterback that gives them the balance that they need offensively, and I believe true freshman quarterback Danny Etling gives them that, but as of right now, it's still unsettled. They're still fighting for that job. They have a very tough schedule, quite honestly, and do they get back wide receiver O.J. Ross from suspension? So there's some slight questions, but right now I think the defense and the running game will lead them to a bowl game this season. I have the Wisconsin Badgers finishing second in the Leaders Division. Now, the reason for optimism, the Badgers play a good brand of football no matter who's the coach. They run the football very well and they play good defense. This year shouldn't be any different despite the changes. The running game will once again be in good hands with James White as well as Melvin Gordon. And they have some solid receiving options as well with Jared Abbrederis and tight end Jacob Peterson. Defensively, they're moving to a 3-4, and they have studs at every level of that defense. Defensive tackle Bo Allen, linebacker Chris Borland, and safety Damian Southwick. Now, the cause for concern, it lies with the center position. They're replacing Travis Frederick up front with redshirt freshman Dan Fultz, and there's still some uncertainty at the quarterback position with sophomore Joel Staub battling JUCO transfer Tanner McAvoy, and they're breaking in some new starters at the cornerback position. But new head coach Gary Anderson, coming over from Utah State, does have the benefit of a favorable schedule, getting Northwestern, BYU, and Penn State at home. And I have the Ohio State Buckeyes finishing first in the Leaders Division. Reason for optimism, what's not to be optimistic about a team that's 12-0, returning 9 starters on offense, including a potential Heisman Trophy candidate in Braxton Miller. Year 2 of Meyer's system will only make that offense that much more explosive. Expect to see growth from the receiving core as well. And defensively, the linebacking core is led by Ryan Shazier, who's one of the best linebackers in the country, as well as one of the better cornerbacks in the country in Bradley Roby. The schedule also sets up nice for them, so that's always a plus. The cause for concern, the defensive line must replace 2 stalwarts up front, and while he's talented and has promise, sophomore defensive end Adolphus Washington is still an unproven talent. And also, can quarterback Braxton Miller take that next step in his passing game as a junior, take that Vince Young-like leap from sophomore to junior year and really open up this offense? That's the biggest question I have, or concern, going into the 2013 season for the Buckeyes. Now let's move over to the Legends Division and start with the Iowa Hawkeyes. Now, the reason for optimism, the Hawkeyes have a very good foundation with the solid veteran offensive line led by Austin Blythe, the center, and a punishing running game with Mark Weissman, and tight end play is very solid with C.J. Fedorowicz. And defensively, they were very good all around. And 13 total starters returned from a team that was mostly in every ball game, and they'll be better versus the run this year, trust me. And the cause for concern, offensively, there's a lack of explosiveness on the flanks. Right now, there's a question at quarterback as well, with sophomore Jake Ruddock leading the way. Can he provide the balance they need for a lackluster passing attack? And the first 5 games should tell you a lot about this Iowa Hawkeye football team, but right now I see them finishing 6th in the Legends Division. Next up, we have the Minnesota Golden Gophers, and the reason for optimism for Minnesota, you can expect quarterback Philip Nelson to make the necessary strides in his sophomore season, especially that he's well protected up front and has dependable running game with running back Donnell Kirkwood and Roderick Williams. Return of wide receiver Jamel Harrison could boost the receiving core, and defensively, they're stout up front with defensive tackle Rashid Hageman, and I'm a big fan of their secondary. They're very solid in the back end of their defense. Now, the cause for concern, the passing game not improving, would be the biggest concern for this football team, whether or not it's from the quarterback position or the receivers not being able to step up. This is a veteran group that can compete week in, week out, but not if the offense becomes one-dimensional. Next up, we have the Michigan Wolverines, and the reason for optimism offensively, I think the Wolverines will still be able to put up points against anybody in the country. It'll just be in a different way. When you look at quarterback Devin Gardner's ability to throw the football, combined with some excellent targets at the receiver position with Jeremy Gallen and Drew Dilo, and also tight end Devin Funchess, they'll be able to outscore a lot of teams. Now, defensively, they do get back talented cornerback Blake Countess. They'll eventually get back linebacker Jake Ryan, who may come back in the middle of the season. He tore his ACL in the spring, but they still have James Ross, who's a very solid player as well. And defensive end Frank Clark is also an outstanding defensive end, but keep an eye on true freshman Taco Charlton. He can see a lot of time because he's a very good one. Now, the cause for concern, too many losses on the interior on both sides of the line of scrimmage. They're going to need a lot of freshmen and sophomores to step up. Now, when you look in the backfield, there's also a question mark with Toussaint coming off a gruesome leg injury. And while the potential of true freshman Derek Green is great, it's still a question mark nonetheless. Coming in third, I have the Michigan State Spartans, and the reason for optimism, defensively, this will still be one of the best in the country. The front 4 is solid while the back 7 is outstanding, in particular the linebacking core with Max Bullough, Danikos Allen, and Taiwan Jones. Offensively, when you look at the O-line, this is a veteran group that's getting back left tackle Fufa Noti from injury, and they will be able to move the pile once again in a running game. Now, the cause for concern, who's going to get the bulk of the carries from the running back position, and also the receiving core. While they're talented, can they overcome the inconsistencies that plagued them last season, along with quarterback Andrew Maxwell? Will he be able to elevate his game to make sure opponents don't stack the box? Those are some serious concerns I have about the Spartans, but if they can figure that out, this would be a dangerous team that could challenge for the division. Have the Nebraska Cornhuskers finishing second in the Legends division. The reason for optimism: Nebraska still boasts a bevy of playmakers on offense with Martinez and Abdullah in the backfield, Bell and Inua on the flanks, and a solid offensive line. Defensively, they're pretty tough in the secondary with cornerbacks Deontay Evans and defensive end Jason Ankara, who has shown the versatility to play defensive tackle. Now, the cause for concern: which Nebraska D will we see? There are some inexperienced questions in the front seven, and since 2010, this D has gotten progressively worse. It's time to stop the bleeding, and offensively, the wait and see still continues for the passing game to stabilize itself. I know Taylor Martinez is an outstanding runner, and yes, he has made improvements each and every year, but they haven't been enough for teams to respect the passing game. And it's that question going into the season that I have about the Nebraska Cornhuskers. The talent is there. They just have to put it together, become consistent, and Martinez has to really take that next step as a passer. And finally, at number 1, I have the Northwestern Wildcats, another team that I think will be a surprise squad in the Big Ten this season. Now, the reason for optimism: they may rival Ohio State for the best offense in the Big Ten. They return 8 starters offensively, and they make the 2-quarterback system work with Coulter and Simeon. Benrick Mark is an outstanding and explosive running back coming out of the backfield, and they're also very solid at the receiving position as well. Now, defensively, the linebackers and defensive backs are extremely talented. You look at both linebacker Chichi Ariguzo and safety Ibrahim Campbell, they could possibly push for All-American honors. Now, the cause for concern: you have to look at their schedule. It's a very tough conference schedule. They have to play Ohio State, at Wisconsin, at Nebraska, and at Iowa, and they have a non-conference game versus Cal on the road, and they do lose key guys up front on both sides of the line of scrimmage. But I do believe they have enough offensive firepower to make it work, and I expect them to compete for their first Big Ten championship since the 2000 season.